You are listening to a story on Sirio Stories, where your IQ is always respected. Enjoy the story. 6 years after the divorce, my ex-wife, Lisa, suddenly said she regretted it. She regretted having cheated years ago, betraying our marriage. Perhaps she saw me still alone, and thought I still loved her as deeply as before. That even though she had cheated and divorced me, I would still wait for her to come back. But what she didn't expect was that I had remarried, and my children were already grown. Today, Lisa chose to tell me directly, because she discovered she was pregnant. And since I had been away on a business trip for over 3 months before returning, the baby was obviously not mine. Lisa sat across from me with a cold demeanor. She confessed to me that her affair started half a year ago. She didn't want to say who her lover was, only that she was pregnant now, wanted to keep this baby, and wanted to give her lover a status. Of course, doing so meant divorcing me. I had once doubted if my ears were deceiving me. I couldn't believe I had been cheated on for half a year. But before I could even ask a question, Lisa seemed to have guessed what I wanted to say. She looked into my eyes and said expressionlessly, "You didn't mishear." I stared blankly at the woman I had loved for 5 years, my heart feeling like it was being pricked by needles. A widespread, chilling pain. For a moment, I felt unsteady. I had never imagined my marriage would run into problems. Lisa was very beautiful, but her personality was cold. She was also slow to warm up to people. During her school days, she was known as the ice goddess. Many boys liked her. Only I persisted in pursuing her for 2 years. Before winning her heart, I truly loved her very much, having been together for so many years. Even though she had never said, "I love you," I had naturally assumed she was accustomed to my existence. Not long after graduating from college, we registered our marriage. We dated for 3 years. Were married for 2 years, only 5 years together. She had cheated. I couldn't accept this fact immediately. I even crazily wanted to find a reason for her affair. I wanted to say I couldn't leave her. And even more, I couldn't accept divorcing her. The words were at my lips. But looking at Lisa's cold face, I suddenly stopped. I asked myself, Lisa has cheated. Even if she agreed to return to the family and continue living with me, would I still want her? I wouldn't. Her, of course, I wouldn't want. Lisa has cheated. She is carrying another man's child. She is tainted. She no longer deserves to be with me. Despite being together for many years, Lisa still didn't understand me well enough. She only knew how much I loved her. Precisely because of that, perhaps fearing my entanglement, after saying she wanted a divorce, she made a phone call, and then hurriedly grabbed her keys and went out, leaving me alone to digest the news. She didn't return until the next morning. I stood on the balcony, taking in the cold air all night, and thought all night, but still couldn't understand why Lisa had cheated. Lisa's family background was quite good. She was also an only child. After graduation, she began taking over her family's gradually declining business. Because of this, for the past 2 years, she had been so busy that she barely had time to rest. Working during the day and socializing with clients in the evening had become her routine. I didn't understand. Being this busy, how could she even find time to have an affair? Perhaps it was because my job was also busy. I was constantly busy negotiating business all over the place, spending too little time with my wife. But that couldn't be a reason for her to cheat. Lisa returned and immediately stood in the hallway, silently looking at me. To say, looking at me, was actually looking at the pile of cigarette butts at my feet. Her expression hadn't changed at all. She didn't feel the devastation her affair had caused me. I stood opposite her across the living room. Her freshness and radiance, and my wretchedness created a stark contrast. I began to question myself. Why should I punish myself for her mistake? After an unknown length of time, I heard Lisa ask, "Have you come to terms with it?" Come to terms with it? Recalling our 5 years together, whenever disputes occurred, regardless of whose fault it was, I was always the one to back down first. She had never bowed her head, not even once. I let out a cold laugh, lifted my foot to extinguish the cigarette butt on the floor, choosing to ignore the dull, numbing pain radiating from my leg bone. I just lifted my chin and asked, Lisa, why? Why did you cheat? We had known each other for 7 years. And been together for 5 years. Last night, I had imagined countless reasons for Lisa to divorce me. As long as it wasn't cheating, I would have considered forgiving her for any reason. But she actually did cheat. And cheating was the one thing I couldn't forgive. Lisa turned her face away indifferently, with a hint of annoyance between her eyebrows. There is no why. Eric, the affinity is over. Wouldn't it be better if we parted peacefully? The affinity is over, part peacefully. Is truly a good saying. All right. I painfully curled the corner of my mouth. We'll divorce. Perhaps because I agreed too quickly. Which didn't match my usual follower image. Lisa looked at me with a little surprise for a moment. She moved her lips, but ultimately said nothing. Since I agreed, the divorce went smoothly. We didn't even inform both families, but hurriedly went to get the divorce certificate. Just like when we registered our marriage. Regarding the joint marital assets, of course, I had to argue logically. The assets belonging to me absolutely could not benefit Lisa and her child. Lisa was unwilling to concede. But she was the one at fault in the marriage. And her connections in City H were far inferior to mine. She fundamentally couldn't win against me. In the end, she had to give up the majority of the savings, only asking me to leave the house to her. She bit her lower lip, her expression looking a bit humiliated. Eric, you earn much more than me. I still have to raise a child later. At least I should have a house, right? I laughed coldly. Where is your lover? Can't he give you a house? Seeing Lisa's expression, perhaps I had hit a nerve. The house was our newlywed home. Both families contributed when we bought the house. I recalculated the savings and felt that further dispute was meaningless. Finally, I agreed to leave the house to her. But she had to make further concessions. On the joint savings, Lisa looked at me for a while, as if she didn't know me. Of course, she didn't know the me who no longer loved her. Married for 2 years. My luggage wasn't much. I carried my luggage and left. The entire process without looking back at Lisa once. After leaving, I didn't feel sad. It was also because of this, that I suddenly wanted to see who the man she cheated with was. How good was that man, after all, that he made Lisa do something she despised the most in her life. I finally restrained myself from looking. Since we were divorced, not bothering each other was the best respect for the past relationship. The second day after the divorce, I received an Instagram message from Lisa's cousin, Helen. She asked me who the boy who went home with her cousin was. After that question, she included 3 emojis covering a mouth with a stealthy smile. I stared at the words for a long time, and finally felt relieved. I replied indifferently, this question. You should ask your cousin. After replying to this message, I conveniently deleted Helen's Instagram. Helen had never liked me. Sending this message was also intended to annoy me. How could I let her have her way? On the bustling, long street, I stood among the crowd and seemed unable to find my way home. In this moment, I realized perhaps it was time to leave this city. The next day, I submitted my resignation to the company. Having worked hard in this city for many years, I had a certain standing in the company. I suddenly didn't want to stay here anymore. I originally came to this city for Lisa. Now, leaving is also because of her. Thinking back, in the short youth of the first half of my life, I almost exclusively revolved around Lisa. If I left, no wonder she would feel bored. After resigning, I visited a few more tourist spots in this city. It took a month to sort everything out before preparing to leave. 2 hours before I was about to board the plane, Lisa suddenly called. For over a month since the divorce, we had completely cut off contact. There was no instance of contacting each other again, let alone Lisa initiating contact. I hesitated for a moment, but still answered. Hello. Lisa's calm voice came through the phone. I heard you are preparing to leave this city? I scoffed. Your information is quite fast. The other end was silent for a while. After a long time, Lisa said coldly, say what you want. Then hung up the phone. Honestly, if it were before, if Lisa spoke to me in that tone, I would have already prepared the gifts she liked and stood under her company building begging her for forgiveness. Alas, times have changed. Today is different from the past. Lisa wouldn't still think I would indulge her temperament as before, would she? How ridiculous. I stared blankly at the phone for a moment. Before leaving, I walked into the nearby telecommunications office to cancel my phone number. I didn't want to have any contact with Lisa anymore. I was born in a small district. The pace of development here is quite slow. Life is not as fast as in many other cities. My grandmother, who is over 80 years old, saw me and immediately clasped my hand, looking at me again and again, constantly complaining that I hadn't eaten properly and had lost a lot of weight. I slowed my pace, smiled under the sunset, and walked home with her, just like when I was a child, looking at her white hair and her back that couldn't straighten. The sudden realization of sorrow spread through my heart. Throughout the years I pursued Lisa. Did my dearest grandmother also stand waiting at the village entrance many times, waiting to see if my familiar figure would step off the large bus? I was raised by my grandmother. My relationship with my parents is not deep. Even this time, after the divorce and quitting my job to return, I didn't greet them. Therefore, on the 12th day after my return, the neighbor held a phone and came looking for my grandmother. His eyes looking at me were somewhat complicated. I immediately understood it was my parents' phone. My grandmother handed the phone to me. My mother was roaring angrily on the other end of the line. I emotionlessly hung up the phone. In less than a minute, the phone rang again. As soon as I said, "Hello," the roaring on the other side immediately grew louder than before. I hung up the phone again. After about 4 or 5 times, my mother finally calmed down. She no longer yelled, just asked me for my new phone number. She said such a big matter as divorce and I hadn't told her. Asking what I was thinking, I indifferently told her, "I'm thinking I've been divorced for almost 2 months. And this time the time it took for you to remember me is shorter than last time." The other end went silent. There was no more sound. When I was little, our family's financial condition wasn't good. My parents decided to go out to work right after I was born, leaving me with my grandmother to raise. A few years later, they earned some money. But they also had a new child with them, a younger brother. The reason for having a younger brother was because I wasn't close to them. Later, during summer vacation, they also tried to bring me to live with them to nurture our relationship. At that time, my brother was 6, and I was 11. At that age, I no longer cared to compete with children for toys. But the younger brother, whom I had barely met, was full of hostility towards me. I casually placed the Ultraman toys that he had scattered on the sofa onto the table. When my parents returned from work, those Ultraman toys were somehow missing an arm or a leg. My brother hugged the disabled Ultraman figures, whimpering and crying with his lips pursed. He knew my parents favored him. As expected, my parents' eyes looking at me were incredibly complex. I tried to explain that I hadn't done it. Even now, I remember the helplessness of that moment. My mother waved her hand, saying dismissively, all right, I know you didn't do it." Turning her head, she said to my father where she thought I couldn't hear, "How could my mother-in-law teach this child to be like this?" My father said nothing, clearly implicitly agreeing that I had done it. Later, they bought more toys. But those toys were locked in a storage room. Only the 3 of them had the key. I am allergic to seafood. My grandmother remembers it the clearest. On the dining table at home, there would absolutely never be any food related to seafood. Before I was picked up to live with them, my grandmother repeatedly reminded my mother not to let me touch seafood. My mother nodded in agreement. But on the 3rd day I was at their house, I had to be rushed to the hospital because of a bowl of seafood porridge. In the emergency room, when I was almost unable to breathe, I heard my parents arguing through the dividing wall. My mother said, "How was I supposed to know he's allergic to seafood?" My father's voice sounded helpless. "Didn't my mother tell you when she visited?" She said, "With so many things going on, how could I remember everything?" My mother's voice was a bit sharp. "Besides, he's so big now, doesn't he know what he can and can't eat? I think he was just greedy, his brother wanted to eat it. And he felt disadvantaged if he didn't. They are so angry now. It is certainly not because they are angry that I didn't tell them about divorcing Lisa, but because they are angry that I quit my high-paying and stable job. They are afraid that I will compete with my younger brother for the family property without a job later. Otherwise, how could they have remembered to call me? Perhaps because it was a big deal. My parents even came back that very evening. Behind them was my younger brother, who is in college. Our eyes met. The smugness in his eyes hadn't even had time to hide. Having not seen them for over 2 years, my parents looked much older. The wrinkles at the corners of their eyes were very visible, and the nasolabial folds were also much deeper, especially my mother's face, which looked somewhat harsh. My mother ignored my grandmother's cheerful greetings and coldly glared at me. Before she even sat down, she angrily yelled, "Eric, have you grown wings? Such big matters as divorce and quitting your job, and you didn't even bother to discuss them with us." My grandmother was surprised by this news, looking at her and then at me, her lips moving a few times, but ultimately saying nothing. Knowing the fragility of our family bond, I felt no emotional ripples. Looking at the burning cigarette between my fingers, my mother was the one who couldn't stand this look on me the most. Her voice suddenly became sharp. "Eric, is this your attitude towards your biological mother? How uneducated, no wonder your marriage failed." Seeing that she had gone too far, my father suddenly reached out and pulled her back, scolding her, his expression showing dissatisfaction. "You are truly maddened. How can you speak to our son like that?" My mother knew she had slipped up, but she refused to apologize to me. She coldly snorted and turned her face away. My father also looked at me awkwardly, his expression seeming to suggest that he wanted me to apologize to my mother. I was the one who was scolded. Do I still have to apologize? Based on what? As a child, am I inherently indebted to my parents? My grandmother brought tea and spoke softly to my parents. "If there's a problem, you should talk nicely to your son." My mother glanced at her with disgust. "What do you know? I think Eric is so bold because you spoiled him." She was accustomed to taking out her anger on my grandmother, and for the sake of family harmony, my grandmother always tolerated it. I flicked the cigarette butt onto the ground, stomped on it with the tip of my shoe, and then turned to look at my father. I asked him, "How did you know I was back?" My father gave a forced smile. "Lisa called us, saying she couldn't reach you lately, and she was a little worried." I pursed my lips, and suddenly found it funny. She was the one who cheated. She was the one pregnant with another man's child. She was the one who first proposed divorce. And she was the one who said the affinity was over and to part peacefully. I didn't hold her back. We were divorced, and there were no more strings attached. I was determined to completely sever all ties with her. But why was she still contacting me? My mother was still rambling on, saying how good Lisa was. She didn't say a single kind word about Lisa, but instead implied that my character was terrible. Lisa being tolerant of me is already good. And so on. I emotionlessly listened to her, using me as a comparison point to put down Lisa. She waited until she had dragged out almost all of my past issues, and finally concluded that I was a person with mental problems. She said that divorce is divorce. But why abandon even the job because of a divorce? That's right, if my mind was normal, I wouldn't be here listening to her grumble. Deep down, I still held onto a distant, unattainable hope, no matter how malicious my mother's words were. The divorce with Lisa was final. The job resignation was final. There was no room for regret. On the night I stood in the cold wind, without receiving a word of comfort, I suddenly realized, the rest of my life is long. Why waste it on someone who doesn't love me? In the end, my mother was still not resigned. She said, I should take advantage of this short break after quitting my job, and seize the opportunity to find a new one. My father also agreed with this suggestion. He and my mother urged me to quickly find another job. They also said that my field of study was not suitable for the family business. Their harmony and understanding were truly unsightly, trying to prevent me from competing with my brother for the family property. I rubbed my aching temples, interrupting their discussion. Had enough? My parents both turned to look at me. Even my younger brother, who had been watching the drama nearby, looked at me in surprise. For so many years, I was known to be gentle. I had truly never talked back or argued with my parents. Precisely because of this, my mother could so brazenly put me down. But as of today, I suddenly didn't want to tolerate it anymore. I was too lazy to beat around the bush, and said softly, if you're done, then leave. Hurry up before you can't buy tickets back. My mother's eyes widened, and after a long time, she pointed at my nose and began a torrent of curses again. She cursed me for being an ungrateful, white-eyed wolf who couldn't be raised. cursed me for my cold and heartless nature. I glanced at her, stood up, and walked out. Coldness and heartlessness are hereditary. And my coldness and heartlessness were inherited from them. I couldn't blame anyone else. I found a guest house in the town to stay in. As soon as I settled down, Lisa called. She somehow got my new phone number. I looked at the 11 digits I knew by heart. Hesitated for a moment, but still didn't answer. Lisa was not discouraged, and quickly called a second and third time. After the divorce, her patience with me seemed much better than before. But this, couldn't she not do it? On the seventh call, I answered. There was no sound on the other end. Only Lisa's steady breathing. I also said nothing, looking down at the call duration constantly changing, waiting until it switched to the number 2. I broke the silence. The affinity is over. Part peacefully. Those words were yours. I don't have the habit of dragging things out with an ex-wife. Lisa. No matter what it is, don't look for me again. On the other side, there was still silence. I didn't wait for Lisa's answer. Hung up the phone, and casually added her to the blacklist. Even when we were married, Lisa didn't treat me well. Now that we were divorced, the number of times she initiated contact with me significantly increased. What's wrong? Is she not used to suddenly losing her follower, me? It's possible. In any case, I devotedly took care of her for 5 years. I understand my parents. After escaping difficult times, they especially didn't want to return to that life again. Otherwise, they wouldn't have created the distance between me and them. Because the family business couldn't lack people. This time, they would stay at most for 2 or 3 days. I truly didn't want to see them. The only way was not to return. I turned off my phone. Staying at the guest house in town for 7 days. On the evening of the 7th day, my grandmother leaned on her old cane. Her difficult steps finding me. This old lady, over 80 years old, took small, fragmented steps, searching from the village all the way to the town. I could even imagine the way she looked and asked for directions along the road. My grandmother's white hair was turned golden by the twilight sun. And her mouth, with only a few teeth left, was smiling at me. She said, "Eric, they're gone. Grandma is taking you home." I suddenly remembered when I was a child walking home from school in the evening. No matter how late it was, she would wait for me at the village entrance. I thought I had experienced many hardships and was past the age of crying. But in that moment, looking at my grandmother's frail, thin, and almost hunched figure, I still couldn't help my eyes turning red. I went home with my grandmother and only then turned on my phone. As expected, my parents on Instagram sent me many essays. Their words were all blaming me for not being sensible. I was fundamentally too lazy to open them. Lisa also used a strange number to send a message, the gist of which was to tell me to live well. This time, she only wanted to confirm my safety. After all, we were once husband and wife. She would not look for me again after this. Let's both live our own lives. To be honest, I naturally didn't hope that the person who betrayed our marriage could live peacefully. Wishing her peace, I couldn't do it. Nevertheless, the 7-figure balance in my card gave me enough courage. I wanted to look at the vast rivers and mountains. I wanted to look at the mountains and lakes. And I also wanted to look at the sun rising and setting. In the 3rd month of taking my grandmother traveling, I met an older alumna from my high school. In a foreign place. I vaguely remembered that she studied very well that year. She was not only beautiful, but also had a balanced figure. At that age of budding adolescence, she was once the goddess of the boys in our dorm. I heard her personality was a bit quiet. She had few friends, and didn't like to get close to others. In high school, I barely had any contact with her. I only knew that many people liked her. Later, we were admitted to the same university, and inevitably met a few times. But it was only a nod of greeting. Mary was carrying a camera, with simple luggage, traveling alone, unlike the sickly pale coldness she had before. Her skin was now a healthy brown color. Her figure, after fully developing, was graceful. Even loose sportswear couldn't conceal it. Unlike the aggressive beauty of Lisa, her beauty was very approachable. Gentleness that makes people unable to help but be immersed. Meeting by chance. Plus our next destinations were the same. So we decided to travel together. Mary spoke little, knew how to respect the elderly and cherish the young, also knew how to read people's expressions, and was very good at making the elderly happy. My grandmother liked her very much. In the evening, my grandmother and I sat together on folding chairs, looking at the stars outside the skylight. My grandmother suddenly said, "That girl Lisa is so kind." I immediately understood my grandmother's meaning, and gave 2 dry laughs. Yes, quite good. In matters of the heart, the thoughts of the elderly are always more sensitive. But while Mary and I shared common interests, there was a difficult barrier to cross. I respected her, but that didn't mean I liked her. Furthermore, I was divorced. I absolutely was not worthy of her. My grandmother was old, and needed to rest for 2 days to recover every time we arrived at a new place. Therefore, I worried about delaying Mary's itinerary, and always wanted her to go ahead. To my suggestion, Mary didn't refuse, just smiled and said, "At the next stop, let's part ways. I also want to stay here for a few more days." The south of the river is misty and drizzly. The scenery of the ancient town was as beautiful as a painting. Standing amidst such beauty, my mood brightened significantly, so I couldn't help but look at Mary a few more times. I had known for a long time that unlike Lisa's ostentatious appearance, Mary had an approachable, captivating beauty. Her facial features were very soft. She had a scholarly air about her, and one could tell at a glance that she was a very easy person to get along with. Sensing my gaze, Mary smiled gently. The distant continuous mountain range was reflected in her slightly curved dark eyes, giving people a feeling of spaciousness. The small paths in the ancient town were winding. The light rain was accompanied by thin layers of white mist. Such a scene made people feel as if they were in a fairyland. I told my grandmother I wanted to go out for a walk. My elderly grandmother didn't want to walk much. She and some old ladies of the same age stayed in the town, sitting together under the eaves. They talked to each other in Mandarin mixed with a hard-to-understand local dialect, and one couldn't tell if the other understood. When they reached the climax of the story, my grandmother couldn't help but laugh first. Then the few of them burst into laughter. I stood not far away, watching for a while. Footsteps from behind came from far to near. I turned my body to look. In the misty rain, Mary held an oil paper umbrella, slowly walking towards me. She stopped next to me. Her movements gentle, as soft as water. A look I had never seen before. Mary asked if I wanted to go for a walk together. It was exactly what I wanted. I took the umbrella from her hand, but tilted it towards her. She was nearly a head shorter than me, but her pace was not slower than mine. The two of us walked together in the ancient town with blue tile roofs and blue bricks. Mary spoke little. I initiated most of the conversation topics. She listened very attentively. Regarding the answers to my questions, she answered very clearly, as if trying to find a standard answer. It was also interesting, looking at her gentle profile. There was a subtle hint of regret in my heart. It was a pity. I was past the age of being easily moved. Mary and I parted ways at the next stop. Afterward, I crossed 3 high mountains and passed 2 lakes, but no longer saw any sign of her. My grandmother and I left home at the beginning of winter, and it was the end of summer when we returned. There were many more smiles on my grandmother's face. She leaned on her cane and went out to chat, telling everyone she met about the vast rivers and mountains she had seen recently. In the village, there were several elderly people the same age as my grandmother. Although my grandmother's descriptive vocabulary was still poor, they all showed longing and admiration. There were also some who didn't want to see my grandmother happy, and after having tea, always insinuated questions about my marriage or work. The smile on my grandmother's face lingered for a long time. Holding back a sigh, "We can't control the affairs of young people," she said in a husky voice. The old lady who started the conversation revealed a meaningful look. The topic then came to a halt. After resting at home for a few days, I began to make new plans for my life. My parents' worries were completely unnecessary. I had no interest in the family business. I had long been tired of the battle in the business world where no swords were seen. I wanted to settle down and cultivate my mind. I majored in civil engineering in college. I didn't do well in my specialized subjects, but I often audited other courses. In these small country towns, land is the most abundant thing. I rented a few acres of land, planning to plant some flowers. In recent years, many people pay attention to festivals, and flower consumption is quite good. In addition, I also wanted to settle down and cultivate my mind. Perhaps there was no better way than growing grass and raising flowers. During that time, Helen contacted me again using her friend's Instagram, a few times probing whether I had truly forgotten her cousin I had loved so deeply. And this decisive departure, in their eyes, was merely retreating to advance. A lot of time was wasted on Lisa, and even more emotion was invested. The cost of leaving was the sacrifice of so many years of youth. The price was indeed a bit high. During that time, the few acres of land I rented needed plastic greenhouses to be set up. I wasn't free to pay attention to her, nor did I want to pay attention to her. Later, the matter gradually faded into oblivion. It's not that I didn't suffer a loss. At least I knew how to stop the loss in time. When the plastic greenhouse was about to be completed, my house welcomed an old acquaintance. She sat in the yard talking to my grandmother. Her back slender, the sunset sprinkled onto her profile, gentle and subtle, as if she had made a decision. Mary looked at me with an examining gaze. She gave me a slight smile. I was passing by here, so I thought I'd visit you. My heart, which had been silent for so long, suddenly couldn't help but beat strongly once, then returned to normal. Mary said she came to visit me, but once she stayed, she didn't mention leaving again. Every morning afterward, she would go out with me. Carrying her camera, she walked behind me, taking pictures as she went. Sometimes I walked very far, and she would still stop in place. I would then stop and wait for her. I knew she liked the scenery here, liked it so much that she was willing to stay. When we reached the flower field, she would open the landscape photos she had taken to enjoy them with me. In the early morning, the fog was dense, cooking smoke intertwined, and fields alternated. A few houses appeared and disappeared between the green hills and clear waters. The scenery of the small town had its own unique flavor. Suddenly waking up, I realized that I didn't know when we had become so close. We looked at each other, then quickly turned away. I saw Mary's cheeks were slightly flushed. I finally realized the abnormality in a slow manner. So, on the day the flower seeds sprouted, I invited Mary for a few drinks in the wooden house in the flower garden. When the alcohol had taken effect, I told her all the complications I had with Lisa over the years. Mary paused slightly. How could an intelligent person like her not understand my implicit meaning? After a moment, she let out a soft sigh. Under the dim yellow light, her eyes shone brightly as she looked at me. You don't need to say it. I know everything. But she refused to say how she knew. After the fervent love for Lisa faded, I didn't know if I still had the capacity to love someone else. But I knew it shouldn't be now. Perhaps I was overthinking it. Mary might not have meant anything. The flowers planted in late summer sprouted in early autumn and bore a tiny bud in midwinter. Mary's camera documented their entire growth process. She went from a travel blogger who wanted to see all the vast rivers and mountains to a cultivation blogger, and was very happy in it. Habit is a very scary thing, I couldn't help but admit. In just a few short months of living together, I had grown used to Mary's company. Like spring wind and fine rain, nourishing all things without a sound. In a hurry, it was the new year again. On the day of beginning of spring, the roses in the plastic greenhouse were in full bloom. The enchanting and radiant roses emitted a soft, rich, and lasting fragrance. I picked one and held it in my hand, admiring it carefully. Mary, who had just been taking photos of the roses, had approached without me realizing. She leaned slightly to admire it with me. The rose in my hand was too close. Its fresh and pleasant scent wafted around the tip of my nose. Compared to her exceedingly beautiful appearance, even the enchanting rose seemed inferior. In this moment, I didn't know what came over me. I suddenly held the rose in my hand towards her. Mary, do you like roses? Do you like roses? Do you like me, the person who gives you roses? Mary was stunned. looked down at the rose I held up, then looked up at me without blinking. In her dark, almond-shaped eyes, countless feelings seemed to be condensed. After a very long time, she took the rose from my hand, bowing her head to gently inhale its fragrance. Then she slowly smiled. I like it, I like roses, or perhaps you like me? I stared at her blankly, completely forgetting to ask for confirmation. I only knew that in this moment, 1,000 seas of flowers were not half as beautiful as the light in her eyes and her gentle smile. Boom! I heard the loud sound of my carefully built wall of heart collapsing. I was not incapable of love. After confirming my inner feelings, on the last day of March, I seriously confessed my feelings to Mary. Mary's expression showed no surprise at all. She didn't even feel embarrassed, and accepted my affection. The way we were together did not change because the relationship had changed. Having been together for over half a year, Mary's personality remained as gentle as when we first met. My grandmother was even more overjoyed, and grew to love Mary even more. After March, my flower garden completely opened up online and offline sales channels, and there were no more inventory problems. My parents called after learning I was growing flowers. Perhaps they realized that there was a very high probability that I would no longer compete with my brother for the family property. My mother's voice was much calmer. It's just that. Her words still implicitly mocked me as useless. In their eyes, what future was there in growing grass and raising flowers? I don't know why my biological parents had such great malice towards me. So, I no longer took their words to heart. I calmly said, since you despise me so much, just pretend you never gave birth to me. My mother's rambling words suddenly stopped. My father quickly took the phone, scolding me for being so old, yet still so insensible. I smiled. After all, you still have a good and sensible son. Having me is truly redundant. My father sighed, told me to calm down, then hung up the phone. I took a deep breath of the flower-scented air, turned around, and saw Mary holding a bouquet of baby's breath, slowly running towards me. She handed the baby's breath to me, rubbed her nose, and asked a little awkwardly, "Do you like it?" Mary is emotionally perceptive. Even though I tried to remain calm, she sensitively noticed my unhappiness. I looked down at the flowers, and suddenly remembered the meaning of baby's breath, the protection of silent love. I recalled that in the past, when my parents and I had conflicts and disagreements, Lisa always frowned at me, even blaming me for my rotten and stubborn temper. I bent down and hugged Mary, feeling her body clearly stiffen. Then the arm around my waist tightened. The distance was too close. I heard her heart beating, getting faster and faster. Suddenly, I longed for this warmth. In the 6th year of being together, my daughter with Mary was 3 years old. She would be able to start kindergarten in September. Mary is also from City H. Because of household registration issues, this time, we all had to go back to City H. It had been 6 years since I divorced Lisa. In these 6 years, I hadn't heard any news of her, nor had I returned to City H. After all, work was important. After arriving in City H, Mary and I immediately went to the local police station. She took our daughter into the station to complete the household registration procedures. While waiting, I had a nicotine craving. I nodded a greeting to Mary, then stepped out of the police station to find a quiet place to smoke. After taking 2 puffs, I casually looked around, and my gaze stopped at a street corner. I saw a familiar figure. 6 years later, meeting again, I almost instinctively wanted to turn around and leave. The next second, Lisa looked up. Her eyes swept past me and then suddenly turned back for a second look. The two of us faced each other across the space. I took a deep drag of the cigarette in my hand, and emotionlessly turned my face away. Lisa and I were the most familiar strangers. There would be no further intersection between us. My eyes briefly caught Lisa freezing for a moment, then suddenly walking quickly toward me. I didn't want to get entangled with her, so I put out the cigarette in my hand, turned, and intended to leave. Lisa called me from behind, "Eric." I frowned, and finally stopped. Lisa walked quickly to stand in front of me. She stood still, staring at me for a long time. Only after a moment did she cautiously ask, When did you come back? Come back? I had no intention of talking to her. Mary and my daughter were still waiting for me. I just said indifferently, if there's nothing, don't block my way. I didn't expect that as soon as I said that, Lisa's eyes would redden. Lisa was always arrogant. It was rare for her to cry in front of me. But what did that have to do with me? I impatiently tisked, about to tell her to move aside, when Lisa suddenly said, Eric. I regret it. This abrupt, non sequitur statement made me frown harder. Lisa's eyes became even redder. She said she regretted having cheated years ago. Regretted having betrayed our marriage. I thought for a long time before understanding. Perhaps she saw me alone now, and thought I still loved her deeply as before. That even though she had cheated and divorced me, I would still wait for her to come back. Lisa was too confident. In her heart, my image as a follower could not collapse. How could she think that I had remarried? And my child was already 3 years old? In that moment, I suddenly really wanted to see Lisa's reaction after learning I was married with a child. I didn't have to wait long, as I heard the voices of Mary and my daughter. Daddy, Daddy. Lisa was stunned, and abruptly turned her head towards the source of the sound. She saw Mary. Perhaps she also recognized Mary, because her expression, the moment she saw Mary, turned pale. She looked at Mary and my daughter for a moment, then looked back at me incredulously. Her lower lip trembled slightly, unable to utter a complete sentence. My daughter broke free from Mary's hand and ran to me. I bent down and scooped the little girl into my arms. She hugged my neck tightly, buried her small head into my shoulder, and repeatedly called, Daddy, without stopping. I gently patted her back to reassure her, then looked at Lisa. 6 years later, she hadn't changed much, still a tall figure, and captivatingly beautiful. The only difference was that she looked much more mature. Unlike the ice goddess of the past, the Lisa of 6 years later had an intellectual beauty. This beauty radiated from within, reflecting the wisdom and grace of the years. Meeting again. I didn't politely say, long time no see. Nor did I look as unfamiliar as a new acquaintance. The love and resentment I had for her had long vanished completely over the past 6 years. Lisa's gaze fell on my daughter, and did not leave for a very long time. Her expression was too complex. Her eyes were slightly lowered, hiding all the surging emotions deep within. I inexplicably understood the complexity of her emotions. It was probably that the backup tire she thought she had was no longer in the old spot. What kind of mentality is that? After years of separation, we both had new families. I felt no ripples of emotion towards the former lover who once stood shoulder to shoulder with me. After a moment of silence, I asked her without any politeness. Unhappy marriage? Serves you right. This is the karma that all cheaters should receive. Before Lisa could answer, Mary walked over. Even her voice, when greeting Lisa, was very gentle. Hello, Junior. Long time no see. Lisa's hand, which was hanging loosely by her side, slowly clenched into a fist. She forced out a smile for Mary that was uglier than crying. My daughter leaned on my shoulder, calling, Mommy, in a soft voice. Mary rubbed the little girl's head, her smile extremely gentle. For some reason, an emotion called satisfaction suddenly welled up in my heart. I took Mary's hand and said to Lisa, This is my wife. Lisa's eyes dropped, falling on my and Mary's tightly clasped hands, and a sadness that wouldn't dissipate seemed to linger in her eyes. Mary soothed our daughter for a moment, then looked at me. She gently squeezed our tightly clasped hands, and asked me in a gentle voice, Shall we go, darling? I nodded, just as we turned to walk away a few steps. We met another acquaintance, Chris. I remembered that he studied very well when we were in school. He was Lisa's biggest rival in her academic career. What made a deep impression on me was that they hated each other because of some competitions in school. Apart from participating in the same contests, the two of them seemed to have no other communication. Even when they faced each other, they would turn their faces away with a look of disdain. Chris was clearly stunned when he saw me. Then he pursed his lips unnaturally. He avoided my gaze and looked to his right. His right hand was leading a little boy, about 6 or 7 years old. When that little boy saw Lisa, He pulled his hand free, calling, "Mommy," and running towards Lisa. Oh, so that's how it is. In this moment, what was there left for me not to understand? I turned to look at Lisa. She bit her lip, turning her face away, not daring to look at me. Mary's grip on my hand tightened. I turned my head as if nothing happened, giving her a reassuring smile, and continued walking forward with her. As I walked past Chris, I heard his voice, "Congratulations." I paused, then gave a cold laugh. Shouldn't I thank you for making it happen? A third party who intervened in my marriage. What right did he have to feign sincerity in front of me? The one who leaves me yesterday cannot be retained. After returning from City H, our family life of 3 became simple again, full and mixed with sweetness. Mary and I implicitly understood not to mention Lisa. One day, half a month later, as I was trimming flower branches, I looked up and saw Mary holding our daughter, her expression heavy, looking out the window. Mary was usually gentle, having been together for many years. This was the first time I had seen this expression on her face. Instinctively following her gaze, outside the window, a familiar figure was standing there. Lisa was standing in the yard talking to my grandmother, but her eyes kept looking towards the window on this side. No wonder Mary looked so gloomy. But why did Lisa suddenly come here? After comforting our daughter, Mary glanced at me and left one sentence, "Don't go out." With that, she pushed the door open and went out herself. I watched through the window as she and Lisa talked. The 2 women of the same age exuded different temperaments, each with their own charm. I briefly looked past Lisa to Mary. The moment my gaze fell, I couldn't look away. In my impression, Mary was always gentle. This tense expression, this whole body full of hostility, was something I had never seen on Mary. I looked at her a little more, not even realizing that the corners of my mouth had curved up. When Mary pushed the door open and came inside, the smile on the corner of my mouth hadn't completely faded. She was clearly stunned, her bright dark eyes quickly deepening. And she asked me in a puzzled way, "So happy?" I understood she had misunderstood my intention, and explained frankly, "Yes. I've never seen you be so hostile to anyone." Hearing this, Mary's face flushed slightly. She lifted our daughter, who was playing with building blocks, and leaned her chin on my shoulder over the child. Her voice, carrying a hint of helplessness, came from beside my ear. "You go out and make things clear with her." Pausing for a moment, she added a quiet sentence, "Don't do anything stupid." I stood under the grape trellis in the yard, facing Lisa. In just half a month, she looked quite haggard. Perhaps she came in a hurry. Her clothes even had a few wrinkled spots. This was not the neat, clean appearance that Lisa in my impression would have. She just stood there silently looking at me, not saying a word. The air was quiet and heavy. My grandmother probably couldn't stand this atmosphere. Stood up with her cane, only saying the yard was a bit stuffy, and she wanted to go out for a walk. After my grandmother walked away, I was the first to break the silence, asking, "Lisa, even after so many years, I always had one question I wanted to ask you." A flicker of interest seemed to light up in Lisa's dead eyes. I guessed she probably thought I wanted to ask her if she had ever loved me. How superficial. Lisa cleared her throat. Her voice still couldn't hide its huskiness when she spoke. "Go ahead." I looked at the slender figure at the window, slightly curved the corner of my mouth, took one step closer, and asked softly, "Do you think stealing a bite smells good?" Lisa froze in place, the expression on her face shattering bit by bit. Even the exquisite makeup couldn't conceal the astonishment and confusion on her features. A feeling of satisfaction welled up in my heart. I saw Lisa gripping the grape trellis tightly, her knuckles turning white. "I'm sorry," she said, the apology that was 6 years too late. I thought. The rest of the words couldn't be spoken. "Why did you think I loved you so deeply? We divorced, and I would still secretly protect you where you didn't know?" "But Lisa, no one in this world is born owing anyone else. You're over 30, why don't you understand?" I didn't speak, my eyes looking at her coldly. "We've gone our separate ways. Everyone finds their own happiness, regardless of her motivation. Logically and emotionally, she shouldn't have sought me out. But in the 6th year after the divorce, She deliberately came to find me. Lisa faced me. There were traces of red blood in her eyes. She finally left one sentence. Eric. Life is mostly unhappy. But after divorcing you, I truly regretted it. I paused, then slowly smiled. So what? No one knows better than me. That Lisa was not genuinely regretful. She was just upset that after leaving her, I was not living poorly, but was even happier than when I was with her. She was just feeling uncomfortable. In short, even if Lisa truly regretted it, so what? Based on what? After putting an extremely humiliating horn on me, would she run in front of me years later and say she regretted it? Don't mention the phrase, the prodigal son returns, in front of me. In this life, the thing I despise the most is, the prodigal son returns. 6 years later, Lisa could still say such things to me. Simply because of the unique favoritism I once showed her. I had loved her with all my heart. She didn't believe I could let go of her so easily. And when she truly realized she had lost me, it was inevitable that she couldn't accept it. Perhaps the years of farming and raising flowers had tempered my character. I was finally more open-minded than her. And I had no intention of talking much with her. My words only urged her to leave soon. She already had a new family. Deliberately coming here to find me was infidelity to her new family. She betrayed me years ago. Does she want to betray her family once again now? Lisa left my house, but did not leave this small town. She found a guest house in town to stay. Every early morning, she would stand far away, looking towards my house. Mary's expression grew gloomier day by day, but she tried not to show her emotions in front of me and our daughter. Finally, one day, in the middle of the night, Mary took advantage of my deep sleep, gently put on her clothes and left the house. After she left, I got up and secretly followed her. As expected, Mary arranged to meet Lisa. I squatted under the window and listened to them talk. After a moment of silence, Lisa spoke first. Before I came here, Chris told me everything. My reunion with him cannot be separated from you. Surprise flashed in my heart. Then I quickly calmed down. Oh. So, this was what caused Lisa's collapse. Mary was silent. Then I heard Lisa say through gritted teeth, "What a high-handed tactic." Another period of silence. I gently stood up, looking through the window gap into the room. So what? Mary stood in the shadow of the white light. From this angle, I couldn't clearly see her expression. Only heard her voice, devoid of any emotion. The despicable one wasn't you first? Lisa's body suddenly stiffened. You know everything? Of course, I know. Mary let out a cold laugh, her voice full of sarcasm. I started liking Eric when I was 18. At 28, I liked him even more. Now at 32, my feelings for him have only increased, not decreased. But you are different. You have the gene of restlessness in your bones. If it wasn't Dan that year, it would have been Mark. Eric later. Being with you was like living in hot water for Eric. He saved me. So of course, I have to save him too. What if Eric finds out? A glimmer of hope seemed to be added to Lisa's voice. Eric. If he knows you once schemed his marriage, can you guarantee that he won't feel troubled in his heart? In a flash, Mary stepped out of the shadow. Her expression was vaguely dark. I heard her say, "I am saving him." How can that be considered scheming? The next day, when I met Lisa again, I walked towards her. Before she could speak, I said directly, "I heard everything you said last night." A strange light flashed in Lisa's eyes. She pursed her lips, her voice a bit dry. "I admit that Dan and I previously did not." I interrupted her coldly. "In the past, our marriage was inherently unhappy. You never put your heart into me. Your parents, and even your cousin, all thought I was punching above my weight by marrying you. They never accepted me. And you never said a word to defend me. Divorced for 6 years. Everyone has a new family. You suddenly traveled all this way to find me. Are you worthy?" I paused, and smiled coldly. "Lisa. Since we were once husband and wife. Let's stop here." The last light in Lisa's eyes completely extinguished. "The affinity is over. Part peacefully." I returned Lisa's exact words to her. From afar, Mary was holding our daughter and waving at me in the morning light. I curled the corner of my mouth, stepped past Lisa, and walked quickly towards them. Our daughter was in the middle. Mary and I glanced at each other and smiled together. We each held one of our daughter's small hands and walked towards the flower field. Slowly walking. The sunlight was still radiant. All the days were still beautiful. An unhappy marriage is not the end, but the beginning of the next happy haven. Living in this world, you will always encounter all kinds of difficulties and obstacles. You just need to maintain your original intention, and someone will be willing to run to your side through layers of fog. ### extra story. Lisa's perspective. The dazzling sunlight streamed through the window into my eyes. I vaguely opened my eyes. The sudden cold made my head pound. The phone next to my pillow still rang annoyingly. The two words, Paul Cantona, continuously danced on the screen. A feeling of annoyance welled up from my heart. I threw the phone out. It shattered into pieces when it hit the wall. The world returned to quietness. I rubbed my temples. My head clearly felt like it was splitting open. But the words Eric said yesterday kept repeating in my ears. Every word, every sentence was meant to cut ties with me. They were clearly the words I had once said. But when he returned those words to me, I realized they were as sharp as a knife cutting into my heart. Divorced for 6 years. We both have families. We shouldn't bother each other anymore, but I couldn't control it. I remember all the good things he once did for me. Back then, he was so good to me that I almost couldn't leave him. The change in our relationship was due to the first time he went on a business trip. And at that juncture, I met Dan, the white moonlight of my youth. It's hard to imagine, after many years of graduation, that moonlight belonging to my teenage years would shine on me without deviation. It was hard for me to refuse, even though I knew doing so was unfair to Eric. In the end, I betrayed the marriage. My mother was not wrong. At that time, I had lived too much in good times. After the divorce, I also once considered going to find him. But ultimately, I didn't. No one knew better than me that Eric liked me, very much, very much. The one who is loved always has a safety net. So what if I was the one who made the mistake? I still had a safety net. Until 6 years later, I met Eric again and saw Rachel standing next to him. Or should I call her Mary? No one knew my secret thoughts back then. Even more, no one knew that initially, it was because I knew Mary had feelings for Eric, that I deliberately appeared by Eric's side coincidentally. Mary is indeed a good judge of people. Eric is a very good life partner. It's just that I don't understand. How could someone as arrogant as Mary marry a divorced man? The year I met Mary, her surname was still Rachel. Following her father's surname, Mary was not only beautiful, she also studied well and treated others gently and politely. She was only 1 year older than me, the child of someone else. In the mouths of most parents in that area, including my parents, initially, my impression of Mary only stopped at the level of the older girl next door. I didn't like her like my other friends did, but I didn't hate her either. Until one day, my father watched me play all day, covered in mud, shaking his head and sighing. I still clearly remember that sentence. It would be great if you were as sensible as Mary. This was the first time I heard a compliment from the mouth of my strict, principled father. And that person was not me. An extreme emotion silently emerged without my knowledge. And when my mother jealously praised Mary, when my aunts and uncles praised Mary for her good grades, when the elderly said to Mary, "Mary is so good, even better than my niece," that extreme emotion spread infinitely. I began to secretly pay attention to Mary's every move, and realized her life was very simple. Apart from studying, it was growing flowers and raising cats. She liked to sit under the tree in the garden reading a book, her upper body hidden in the shade of the tree, her slender legs bathed in the sunlight. The fat orange cat lay on her lap, lazily squinting and sleeping. Sunlight, fresh flowers. Girl, fat cat. Under the shade of the tree. It looked beautiful no matter how you looked at it. Such a quiet and obedient girl. No wonder she was loved by the elders. I toned down my mischievous personality and began to intentionally or unintentionally imitate Mary, imitating her temperament and even her way of dressing. Even I knew I was like an imposter. While hating myself like this, I couldn't control myself and continued to imitate. Because even my parents started to praise my change. Until I was 16 years old. Mary was 17 that year. On the way home from school, Mary was blocked in an alley. Mary was truly too outstanding. So outstanding that it made people jealous. But it was purely a bullying incident. This was the first time Mary had encountered this situation. She was so frightened that her voice calling for help was distorted. It was after school in the evening. There were quite a few students passing by the alley entrance. But no one stopped to help. I stopped, but didn't dare to step forward. Until a tall, thin teenager, hearing the noise, stopped at the alley entrance. He peered into the alley. After seeing the situation inside clearly, without saying a word, he picked up a wooden stick next to the wall and rushed in. 2 hands can hardly fight 4. The teenager rushing in alone naturally didn't fare well. He was beaten quite badly. But he also successfully rescued Mary. I stood at the alley entrance and heard his voice distorted with pain, but still full of threat. The next time I see you bullying her, I will kill you. The teenager and Mary helped each other walk out of the alley. I hid behind the tree. In that moment, because of my inaction, I suddenly felt that I would no longer have the face to confront Mary. Later, I saw the teenager's drawing. In Mary's sketchpad. The drawing was of Eric. On the margin of the drawing was the teenager's name. Eric. Perhaps I understood Mary even better than she understood herself. Based on just a few words, I guessed Mary's secret thoughts. Young girls often have a slight hero complex. That night, the teenager who rushed out to protect her was undoubtedly a hero in Mary's eyes. But Mary did not intentionally approach Eric. She only occasionally, after Eric finished playing basketball, handed him a bottle of mineral water when he was drenched in sweat. Eric accepted the bottle of mineral water from Mary's hand and said thank you with a smile. The 16 or 17-year-old teenager had handsome features and clear eyes that looked straight to the bottom. But the gaze he gave Mary was full of unfamiliarity. He didn't recognize Mary. Didn't recognize the little girl he rescued that night. That's right. Mary was always proud. She naturally didn't want the person she liked to see her distressed appearance. After Eric left, Mary stared at his departing back for a moment. She quickly blinked twice. The corners of her mouth slightly curved. I knew that was the sign that she liked someone. In all those years, that was the first time I saw Mary showing interest in the opposite sex. The thought of, what if I take the person Mary likes, made an intense emotion surge uncontrollably from my heart. And it could not be stopped. Being with Eric was easier than I imagined. During that time, I saw Mary's disappointed eyes more than once. But Mary was still Mary. Her pride prevented her from doing something like snatching someone from another person's hands. At this moment, I became even more convinced of my determination to be with Eric. Finally, in the year Mary turned 18, an illegitimate child of her father, lost to the outside world, came looking for their home. Mary's mother had a very upright personality. How could she swallow this insult? But good upbringing also prevented her from making a scene in the street. She took Mary and left the house. I finally no longer had to live under her shadow. For unclear reasons, I did not break up with Eric. He was very good. His personality was also very good. And he was more interesting than I imagined. Having lived for 17 or 18 years, he was the first boy I had contact with. I had long been unable to distinguish whether my feelings for him were real or stemmed from the initial bet. It was almost a matter of course. After graduation, the two of us went to register our marriage. In the early days, I genuinely intended to spend the rest of my life with Eric. Why it changed later, I no longer want to think about. In the end, I was the one who was wrong to him. After the divorce, we should have naturally kept our distance, unrelated to each other. So why did I chase him all the way here? Perhaps it is truly as Eric said. Even after the divorce, I didn't want to see him with another woman. Especially when that person was Mary, the person I had once intentionally avoided. The day before I was preparing to return, Dan and my cousin suddenly came together to find me. They didn't find me, but they blatantly came to find Eric. My cousin was accustomed to being arrogant in front of Eric. and was even cursing Eric. Every word mocking him as useless. And still shamelessly interfering in other people's families after the divorce. Eric's expression did not change. He indifferently glanced at my cousin and Dan. Sarcastically, "The chains at home can no longer hold you. Why are you running to someone else's doorstep to cause trouble?" My cousin's face was extremely ugly. Without waiting for her to speak, Eric suddenly laughed. He looked at Dan. "So you are the third party from back then? Have you managed to maintain the status of rising from third party to legal spouse all these years?" Dan's face was extremely unsightly. "Eric." Only then did Eric seem to notice me standing behind them. He sighed, seemingly feeling that arguing with them was a very meaningless matter. He said to Dan, "In this world, cause and effect inherently cycle. And it always comes true. Dan, whether you believe it or not, the pain you caused back then, you will surely have to endure tenfold later." Dan had his back to me. I couldn't clearly see his expression. Could only see the blue veins popping up on the back of his hand. He was the one who was wrong to Eric first. No matter what Eric said, he had no power to refute. Finally, Eric waved his hand, ordering, "Lisa, take them away from here. I never want to see you people again in this life." With that, he held Mary's hand and disappeared into the colorful sea of flowers. I watched their backs gradually fade away. A sense of indescribable bitterness in my heart. Dan walked towards me with a leaden face. He probably wanted to vent the suppressed anger from Eric onto me. "Why don't you know the way back yet?" I glanced at him, thinking of his intentional appearance during my marriage with Eric. His base calculation of trying to snatch my love was probably already told to Mary. A sense of disgust that couldn't be shaken off filled my heart. I turned and walked away. Because of the initial bet, I lost the teenager who accompanied me throughout my youth. In this life, I ultimately still lost to Mary. From now on, I have forever lost the person who loved me the most.